All right. So last time in class, I gave you homework 7, which is the annual worth analysis assignment. That's the one that's due on Monday. And then also on Monday, please bring your computers if you can. And I see a lot of computers here. I'm glad that you got my email. Sorry I didn't think of it earlier. But I'm pleased that as many of you brought them as you did. Today we're going to be talking about something known as unrecovered investment balance. And this is a way of comparing alternatives. Remember that when we were doing present worth analysis, annual worth analysis, future worth analysis, our main goal was always to choose what's best. We're going to look at more sophisticated ways of choosing what's best that give us more details about what's going on in the project. Before it was always just we're taking everything to the present or taking everything to the future and finding out if it's profitable or not profitable. But there are better ways for us to analyze that, and today's the beginning of those better ways. All right. So here is a picture of a food truck. It's a Canadian food truck. It's called Disco Dog. And I've never had a Disco Dog before, but they look pretty good. When I was doing a little bit of research about food trucks, I found that on average they cost about $85,000, if you can believe that. It's a lot of money to put into a truck. Apparently it's more than just the vehicle. You know, it's all the equipment inside, ovens, grills, permits are really expensive in some places. I think probably here in Huntington, I only know of one food truck. It's like a Middle Eastern food truck. Anybody ever had that before? Is it a restaurant? Did they move? Which one? No, it was a different one. The old food truck was, I think, called Chickpea, I believe. Anyways, I haven't seen very many food trucks around here. I went to Portland, Oregon a couple of years ago, and there were like whole city blocks that are nothing but food trucks. They are really popular there. But they can really add up. The expenses are really high, especially when you consider if you're selling something like hot dogs, even if you're able to charge $8.50, which is what these guys charge for a hot dog, the Lucky Chucky is $8.50. Well, now that's Canadian money, which is a little bit lower than American money. But, and it does look delicious. I'm a little hungry right now. But, you know, when you're in a business like this, it's natural to have the question, how long is it going to take to pay off your food truck? If you're only making $8.50 for each hot dog that you sell, and the $85,000 was just your initial investment, that truck cost does not include labor, the cost of the materials that you're using, doesn't include fuel, doesn't include insurance, and a lot more business expenses that go into doing this. And so we need some sort of an analysis that can tell us at every year how much do you still have outstanding or unrecovered. The idea being that you spent $85,000. So at year 0, it's sort of like that $85,000 is out in the wind. It used to be money and now it's a truck. And so you have an unrecovered investment balance. You haven't made any profit yet, and so you haven't yet recovered $85,000. But during the first year, you owe interest on that $85,000. So the balance is gradually creeping up, and we have sort of an oversimplified way of looking at unrecovered investment balance. Here's a figure that illustrates it. Now remember the end of year assumption that says we get all of our revenue at the end of the year and we pay all of our expenses at the end of the year? You know, we could do it week by week or month by month, but let's just break up time into periods. What this graph is showing is at the beginning of time, when you begin a project, you have this huge balance of money you haven't recovered yet because you spent a certain amount of money on equipment. Then during the first period, the balance is going up because of interest. If you borrowed money, then you owe the bank more at the end of the first year than you did when you first borrowed the money. But even if you had cash on hand and didn't borrow money for the project, you could have put that money in an account and been earning interest on that. And so we have to remember the MAR, the minimum acceptable rate of return, isn't always just about borrowing money. It's about what your money has to be making for you to be satisfied. So that's why this blue line is going up. You can see that we start off with P, the principal, which is the original investment amount. And then at the end of the first year, the amount is up to P multiplied by 1 plus I prime. I prime is just our interest rate for this one. So that's why the balance goes up. Now, at the end of the first time period, we look at the difference between expenses and revenue. You know, there are costs like the labor, the propane, the hot dogs, the buns that they made, all the expenses, all of the revenue, and hopefully there's more revenue than expenses. And so you have profit. But profit, all it's doing is it's bringing down the balance that is yet unrecovered. And so it's lower now than it was originally. Because you had some profit, it brings down the unrecovered investment balance. And so this pattern repeats itself year after year. You have the balance growing because of interest. Then you have a big drop in the balance because of your profits. And then eventually, when it goes down to zero, that means that you're breaking even. That you finally recovered your investment, your original investment. And so beyond that point, you know, after it reaches zero, then all of the money is profit at that point. All of the profits are no longer covering the original investment balance. We're going to spend a lot of time next week talking about something called the internal rate of return. And I prime is the variable we use to refer to this internal rate of return. It's an interest rate, and it's an interest rate that if you solve for it in a graphical way or using a spreadsheet, then what you're looking for is you're looking for at the end of a certain study period for everything to cancel out and equal to zero, meaning that all of the revenue and all of the expenses reaches zero at the end of the study period. That's the I prime. That's one of the definitions of internal rate of return. So in a lot of these problems where we're using internal rate of return, we're trying to solve for it like it's an unknown. Today it's not going to be an unknown because today we're going to begin just by constructing one of these diagrams using a tabular version of one of these diagrams. We're actually going to, rather than make a graphical representation of it, translate it into a table, and so that I can show you with a spreadsheet how to calculate unrecovered investment balance over time. And later on you'll have a couple of homework assignments where you have to simulate that same thing. Get a spreadsheet and make a table of investment balance. So are there any questions so far? All right, so today's in-class exercise is partly by hand and partly on Excel. I know a lot of people don't have computers today, and that's fine. You'll be able to do the first part of our in-class exercise, which is to calculate an amount based on the problem description here. Doing updates. It decides who's in charge, right? Yep. I had some students taking a final exam one time, and the computer started applying updates. It was a disaster. Okay, so here's what you do. On the first one, where you have on the back side of the paper the 4% table, you're going to take a loan out of $85,000. Presumably you're buying a food truck, I guess. So you're taking a loan of $85,000 for 5 years at 4% interest rate. And you're going to pay that back annually. So draw the cash flow diagram that shows that, and then use the table lookup values on the back side of the paper to find out the amount. Once you have the amount, then I'm going to illustrate for you how to set up a spreadsheet in Excel to calculate the unrecovered investment balance. Everybody get $19,093. The cash flow diagram is a little different than sometimes because often what we've been doing is making a deposit and then receiving withdrawals, but this is the opposite way around. We're getting the money, which is an inflow to us, and then paying it back over time. Okay, if you don't have a computer, then you can just sort of watch the steps that I'm going to be doing with Excel and get the idea, I hope. If you want to fit a lot of text into a cell, this tool here, Wrap Text, will allow you to tell it to put the text in the same cell rather than spreading it across other ones. So you see how where I'm going, this is an example of a lot of text in a cell. So it is right here, Wrap Text, and then it will force it all into just a single cell. All right, so we're going to go through 5 years for this one. And we have beginning of year and end of year. That's why there's no zero, is that the first year, if we have a cash flow diagram, let's take a look at the cash flow diagram. Oh, there it is. All right. So the first year begins at 0 and goes to 1. So here's year 1, here's year 2, year 3, and so on. So there's a beginning and an end. And we're referring to that beginning and end on the spreadsheet. So the formulas for each column are provided in the handout. Let's see. Here's the formulas that we're going to be using. So let's crop that down a little bit. That's fine. I just like to have the formulas on the screen as I'm doing it. All right. So here we have the column numbers. So column 1, it just starts out the unrecovered principal balance. At the beginning of the year, we owe $85,000 because that's how much we got from the bank. I'm going to go ahead and format all of this as currency at the beginning. So I'm going to go here, currency. I'm going to delete the trailing zeros because I don't need to necessarily see the cents. Dollars is enough. I'll center it. All right, so $85,000. That's just how much. That's how much we have to pay back because that was the amount of the loan to begin with. Any questions with how I've set things up so far? All right, so the interest for this year, since it's 4% interest rate, this interest amount should be 4% of $85,000. So I'll say equals, I'll click here where the interest rate cell is and press F4 so that it always refers to that. The anchoring puts in the dollar signs, multiplied by the cell location. And so it's going to see the $85,000. So the interest rate, the interest amount during the first year is $3,400. So the balance of the loan, if we go to the picture and see like this view of things, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find out what are all of these amounts. So let me paste that picture here. So we want to know the effect of the growth in the balance over time. So just before the revenue kicks in, how high is that unrecovered investment balance? It's going to be the $85,000 that we borrowed plus the $3,400 in interest. So now we have an $88,400 balance. All right? And now the amount you give back at the end of the year, we already calculated that from the hand calculations. We found out just from the table lookup method, this is the wrong one. We found out from the table lookup method that we want the amount to be $19,093.55. So we're going to pay the same amount every year. That's how much we're paying. $19,093.55. Okay, I'm going to drag that down because it'll be the same amount that we pay each year. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 payments. Now, when you pay back a loan, part of it is going towards interest and part of it is going towards principal. It's a weird thing that you'll notice when you buy a house for the first time is at the beginning when you're buying a house, most of the money you're paying to the bank each month is interest for them. And a very small fraction of your monthly payment brings down the balance of your loan. It's called amortization, the split between how much goes towards the bank as interest and how much is buying down your principal. So if your balance is $85,000 and you have $3,400 worth of interest, then because you're paying $19,000, that means most of that is going to go towards your principal in this case. And so it's going to be equals the $19,094 minus the principal. So you've got $15,694 that is going as bringing down this balance. And so the unrecovered investment balance at the end of the year is going to be, the formula for that is 6 is 1 minus 5. So equals 1 minus 5. So where did your profits go? Your profits went towards interest and bringing down unrecovered investment amount. Okay, the last thing is here, and it started off at $85,000 because that was how much we borrowed. Now, at the beginning of the second year, that's the same as the amount that is at the end of the last year. So we just say equals and then click on this cell location. It has the previous amount. Okay? And so the interest, we can drag that cell down again. It's going to have the formula. It'll just multiply this by our interest rate to calculate the interest amount. We can drag down the formula here because it's going to know how to apply what had done previously. In fact, we can just drag all of them down and it automatically knows how to do the calculations. And rather than drag them one at a time, if we select all of these cells, then we can drag the whole thing down and it will finish all of the calculations for the whole problem simultaneously. And so what it shows is that it goes down to -7. Perfectly, it should go down to 0, but when we use the table lookup factors, you're rounding off. The table lookup factor that we used with 0.22463. If we had more decimals there and incorporated the perfect amount into our answer, then it would go to 0. But for, all intents and purposes, it does go down to basically 0. So now, the next part of the in-class exercise, I ask you to fill in the blanks on this graph with the amounts that you got from the spreadsheet. And so what it shows is how you are retiring the unrecovered investment balance. Originally, as soon as you take that loan, you are $85,000 in the red. And the reason why this is an up instead of down, we have it going above the x-axis because the title that we put onto this is unrecovered investment balance. And so by definition, we know that it's an amount that we haven't gotten back yet. So you can think of it as, the fact that this is a negative is built right into the description of the y-axis. So that's why it's up. So we can fill in the values from our table and just see how, the profits each year, the difference between our revenues and expenses are where we're getting the money to retire the unrecovered investment balance. And so you'll need to follow the same process on a future homework assignment. So I'd encourage you, if you are following along with Excel, to save your work so that you can come back to this file again and kind of refresh your memory on what you did. If you didn't have your computer today, that's fine, but what I'd encourage you to do is just look up the video on YouTube and take 5 or 6 minutes and set this file up. Just follow along as I do the steps, follow along in Excel, just so that you have the file saved and can keep it in your pocket as a tool when this comes up as something you need to do in the homework assignment. Any questions on how to set up the spreadsheet or what the different columns, like the interpretation of these different columns? No? Okay. Well, we're going to finish a little early. I can stick around and look at your spreadsheets if you do have any questions you want to ask me about individually. Before we do that, just a reminder that homework 7 is due on Monday. I'll take the answers home with me over the weekend in case there are any questions that come up. You can stop by my office hours or send me an email, and I'll do my best to respond. So have a great weekend. I'll see you next time.